We are honored to have here as our keynote speaker this morning someone recognized throughout Canada as a leader in governance. Mr. Steve Orsini is Secretary to the Cabinet, Head of the Ontario Public Service, and Clerk of the Executive Council. He was appointed to this position in July 2014 and has over 26 years of experience in the Ontario Public Service. Mr. Orsini has held a number of leadership roles, including Deputy Minister of Finance, Secretary of the Treasury Board, and we've asked Mr. Orsini to offer a keynote presentation this morning on the future of government in Ontario. And would you please join me in welcoming Mr. Steve Orsini.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, everyone, for being here this morning, and thank you for inviting me. This is a great opportunity to be here, and I'm going to have to put you through a PowerPoint presentation. I know it's too early in the morning to go through one of those, so I apologize for that, but there's a few things I want to point out too. I'm a big fan of the Public Policy Forum. I should disclose my bias. I'm on the board. It's a great organization, great governance, I must point out. But they're doing amazing work, and they've, as Darren pointed out, they play a particularly important role, bringing public policy, private sector, non-government or non-profit organizations together with labor and others. It's a multi-stakeholder think tank, Canada-wide, and it's doing great work, so excited to be involved. And I want to thank Barbara for asking me to speak today. I have had a very positive relationship with the Ombudsman's office, and I want to really talk about the relationship we have with the Ombudsman's office and the crucial role they play and the changing role that the Ombudsman's office play. And I'll talk about how we view that relationship going forward. So there's a few things I want to cover. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in each of these, but we can't ignore the world we live in. It impacts how we operate. And that's something I want to spend a bit of time because it translates into everything we do and the relationship we have with the officers of our legislature. I want to spend a bit of time on the government's priorities, talk about accountability and the key drivers of change. And we got to be cognizant of those key drivers and then where we think our partnership can evolve with the Ombudsman's office. So those are the areas I want to cover. So this chart here, I spared all the technical data charts. That'd be too cruel to go through those. And plus, since I've been in Cabinet office, they removed those charts from my presentations. I'd always like complicated data charts, and they figure I get hurt by having those nowadays. So, but they're major themes, and why I think they're important is we are being impacted by global trends. And I'll just talk about a few of them. We're in fierce global competition. Our ability to attract investment is being challenged every day. And so how we operate and how we deal with issues is going to be fundamental to creating a more dynamic, innovative business climate. And so it's going to affect how we operate as a public service, how we regulate. In the fall economic statement, today's our budget, so I'll try not to release any confidential details today on the budget. So I'm going to refer to the fall economic statement, but there might be similar themes. In the fall economic statement, we talked about the need to get regulatory approvals a lot faster. But there's a risk adverse. The public service tends to be risk adverse for a lot of reasons. You don't want to get anything wrong. It's in the legislature, it's top of fold in the newspaper. In the world of disruptive technology, how are we going to change faster if we're very risk adverse? We need to speed up our approvals for major investments. In the fall economic statement, we committed to reducing the speed to get our certificates of assurance, our environmental approvals, cut in half the time. So that means we're going to move from we have to review every application, which can take up to 2 years, and by that time we lose the investment, to more risk management. That might mean some things fall through the cracks. How do we operate as an organization The speed in which we have to deal is accelerating. The disruptive technology means that we as an organization have to take risks, do more pilots. That means we may not get things right 100%. But in a world of we gotcha, you screwed up, or you didn't do something properly, that drives us back to a more risk-averse culture. And we need to work with our partners and all our legislative officers to find out how do we work together to drive change. I'm not going to go, the big one is resource constraints. We don't have unlimited resources to have all the best services, so we might have some areas where people have to wait. We have other areas where we can't fill all the gaps we want to. It doesn't mean we can't drive transformation and improvements in how we deliver programs and services, but it's really important that we understand these dynamic forces that are at play. You know, if I was a CEO and someone said to me, you know, we're going to have this group that is going to evaluate how your customers feel, whether you treated them fairly, whether you're providing excellent service, I'd say that's fantastic. That's exactly what I want. And that's what the Ombudsman's role is. It's a vital, and I'm going to argue today that they need to play a bigger, more important role than they played to date, and I'll spend some time on that. Now, if someone told me as a CEO, by the way, they might release reports saying you're not doing a good job before they told you, that may not be a good thing. That's why the second part of this is partnership is really important. So let me just go to, I won't go through the government's priorities. There are 4 main ones. Driving, you know, a dynamic business climate. We don't have vast oil reserves in the province of Ontario, gas reserves. We have people. That is our resource. We need to build and train a highly skilled labor force. And you'll hear a lot more about that. Infrastructure, very important. The other thing is, and as officers of the legislature, we have to think longer term, whether it's climate change or people retiring 40 years from now. Governments have to think of longer term issues, and that's part of the government's priorities. Not just worry about tomorrow, like the immediate tomorrow, but thinking longer term. The 3 foundation pieces is we need to transform how we deliver services. And I use the analogy, it's like you're really massively renovating your house when you're living in it. You got to continue to provide goods and services, deliver important services to the public, but you have to drive and transform how you're doing things. That makes it a little more challenging. Financial management, accountability, being open and transparent, and this is where the important role of the Ombudsman's office plays, is ensuring a more open, transparent, accountable system. It's important. It's a function we need to embrace. So this is more of a schematic as to what influences how we deliver public services. It's not exhaustive. It's not to scale. You have the government decision making on the top left. You have the public service operation on the bottom. I'm going to postulate that the right side is becoming more important, not less. That if I adjusted this pie chart to weight, you'll see the right side growing and the bottom right especially growing. And that means we are going to have to think differently how we operate, how we engage. We have more officers of the legislature with a broader mandate because the public wants and demands and expects greater transparency and accountability. And we know third-party reviews are really important. We often hire an outside consultant to validate something that we might be doing internally. When I had an issue as Secretary Treasury Board or in Finance, I always brought internal audit earlier because I knew they were a partner to help us. We know for privacy legislation, we need to bring in the Privacy Commissioner early in the process to make sure we get that right. And I'm going to postulate that the role of the Ombudsman as someone that really takes the perspective of the consumer as a service, the beneficiaries of our services need to be brought in earlier, more upstream of how we design and implement programming. But you'll see that the public will have a greater influence, and social media will be driving that. We just see that has fundamentally changed politics in Canada and around the world. So my understanding of the role of the ombudsman is really important. They have three key functions that I understand. It's more complicated than this, but the early warning is one that we treasure. If the ombudsman's office is getting calls that something has gone off the rails or is not working properly, and they can alert us to some glitch in the system, and we can correct it quickly without having a report and all that, that's value added. And that's where early warning, working in partnership is particularly important. And there's been a number of examples where that has worked really well. And we need to embrace that. That means you have to have a good partnership, working relationship. Dealing with complaints. Complaints are reactive in a sense. Someone has a complaint. The need to adjudicate and solve those quickly is very important. If people felt or feel there's an injustice, it's even worse when it takes a protracted length of time to address it. But that means we have to work quickly and effectively together as a partnership to address that. So having a good system in place on the ombudsman side, but also on the ministry side or the department side is important. The last area I think is becoming more and more crucial over time, and that is systemic change and balance. And I'll talk about each of those components. You know, I spent 7 years in the hospital sector, and we knew that it didn't matter whether a hospital performed a surgery correctly, the patient could come back with complications. Was it the surgery that didn't effectively provide the healthcare service, or the fact that the family or the individual didn't take the prescriptions or follow the directions from the hospital, or there was no home care support? We're into a systemic a network of issues. That means that the last person to touch the file may not be the person that, if you're doing a systemic review of the system, it may not be the problem or the issue that needs to be addressed. Systemic change will become a bigger issue and more important over time, not less. And I think the expanded mandate on the Ombudsman's office now reaches beyond just the province. And to other players in the system, to me, they'll see end-to-end much more clearly of the citizen, the individual, and how the system responds to their needs. And we're doing some interesting policy work in the Ontario government, working with other provinces on a number of, but I'll just use one example, youth at risk. We have 19 ministries delivering programs for youth, not all of them geared towards youth at risk, but we know that to really tackle youth at risk and those who are falling through the cracks, it can't be done from a program perspective. It has to be done from the client's perspective. So the systemic change. The balance part is, and this is something that is applicable to any third party looking at anyone. It's the government commenting on others and vice versa, is that not everything is problematic. And if we have a system that only focuses on we gotcha, or you made an error and you got most of it right, but we focus on the what you didn't, a couple of things happen. One is the public has a distorted view of that service and they may want to change it for the sake of changing it. And two, we don't know what's working. We don't get feedback what's working. It's important to kind of underline the things that are not working, but it's equally important to highlight the things that are working. That's important to get that balanced approach. And I think the Ombudsman's office and the thoughtful reports does that. It needs to highlight the things that are working, but draw attention to the things that are not working, because that's the area we have to focus on. So how do we build a relationship with the Ombudsman's office? So there's a number of key critical success factors in my view. The first one is have a single point of contact. It's one window access into an organization. That's particularly important. The more complicated it is, the more important that role is. If it's a one-off call, probably less important. If it's a systemic review, absolutely crucial. That individual also has to take responsibility for establishing all the networks. It may be a number of people within the ministry. It could be across different departments. And that person needs to establish those networks and build those contacts in quickly. Ongoing communication is really important. There's requests for information. Sometimes you think they'll be immediately available, sometimes they're not. It's important to understand what's available, what's not, how quickly it'll be available. Help to refine the investigation and review, really important. And the last one is understanding each other's role. We should not be timid or afraid if someone's questioning what we do as a public service. I think that's healthy to have people come in and say, you know, things aren't working out as well as you think, or you could do better, or these people feel they're being disenfranchised. That's important feedback. And we have to understand the role of the ombudsman. They have to be independent. They have to ask questions, and we shouldn't shy away from trying to give them the best information we can within that time frame. It's that mutual respect is crucial, and we've had that, and it really leads to positive change in my view, because we both have the same objective. How do we improve public services? And each of us have a role, and we need to respect that role. So I want to talk about, so that's our relationship with the Ombudsman's Office. I want to talk about us as an organization. I'm going to refer to the Ontario Public Service mainly, but I think this is applicable beyond just the OPS. We have big complex ministries. Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Community Social Services, even some of the smaller ministries are really dynamic and have a lot of moving parts. And you got your policy, you got your legislative functions, you got your service delivery, human resources, communications, stakeholder. It's art and science to make sure all that works well, and that ministries can bring forward, or ministers can bring forward important public policy. But we're in a world where we're complex organizations in complex systems. And this chart is one that I really think is where the leading edge of our policy thinking has to turn next. And that is focus not us as a delivery agent or a program department or a policy shop, but the citizen, the client, patient, student, whoever you're talking about has to be at the center. And we don't do this as well as I think we could. And the reason why that's very important, because we will then realize we're not the only game in town. We might have a number of ministries delivering important programs and services, but we're only one slice of what that individual sees and what they need in the system. Youth at risk, you might have the justice system, the healthcare system, the educational system, the training components. If each of us try to fix it independent of the other, we will not be effective. There's interesting work on the justice side called situation tables. And what the police will say, by the time we get these individuals, it's too late. You have to move upstream, beyond your areas of responsibility. And we see in that healthcare, you cannot integrate patient care focusing on the provider. And so we need to recognize that. Now, we've done some interesting things to really transform and help us look at the client from that perspective. And we did a pilot with Ryerson. I know some municipalities have as well, through a hackathon. And what's different, and it's not cyber terrorism or anything, we're just talking about people hacking into websites. This is about putting the client at the center, bringing all the stakeholders together and the entrepreneurs, and having competitions who can come up with the best idea. And we did the first pilot with Ryerson on accessibility, but they're being done all over the place. They may not all work out, but what I like about it, it changes the perspective. It changes the perspective of us looking at it from a ministry perspective or a department perspective, to shifting our focus, because we're often looking at the wrong end of the telescope. We're looking at who's providing the program, as opposed to who's receiving the services. And this is a simple chart, but it's a change in orientation and perspective of really looking at the issue from the client's perspective. And then we may realize we are not the right organization to deliver that service. We need to work in partnerships and say, no, municipalities might be much closer to the ground in dealing with those people in the community. They might have a better window or insights into how the services affect their local population. Why would we be opposing a provincial solution on a really a local situation? And the Premier's appointed Karen Petrie on community hubs. And I think what I like about community hubs is it does three things that go against the grain. One is it's client focused. It's just by virtue you're looking at a community hub is how it deals with the client's needs in the community. One, it has to integrate services. That's what the hub is. It's not just a single service, it's multiple services in the synergy among them. And the third area that's important, it's community-based. Not everyone has the same issues. So it's more case management of community need. And that's a different concept, much more complicated. You'll hear a lot more about the role of what we're trying to do in community hubs, working with the municipalities, school boards, and the like. But it's changing, again, our focus from we're providing a program through this ministry to who benefits from these services. And that's where I think the Ombudsman plays a huge role, because not only they by definition take the issues that consumers, clients, and citizens have of the system. So by virtue, their role, I believe, will become more important, not less. So what are some of the key drivers that I think is going to enhance accountability, openness, and transparency? So if you look at, these are just illustrative. I wouldn't worry about going to the second decimal point on some of these things. But, you know, one of the key things is people want to access services through the internet. And so we really have to think how we move to a digital way of providing services. And that, you'll be hearing a lot more of how do we digitize government. The second area is they want more on their mobile devices. And I think we have to really change how we deal with things. Our Employment Ontario actually has a chat line, because they notice for youth in training, having them come in to meet someone or to read a document is not an effective way of connecting with youth. And so now there's a chat function. Now it's within 9 to 5 still. I think at some point it would be 24/7, but we're a long ways off from that. But we're going to have to move to what is more convenient to the consumer as opposed to the provider. The second point there is people want to be involved in the co-design. So you'll hear a lot more of whether it's crowdsourcing or co-design. And we think there's a huge opportunity to involve society to deal with social problems. And we do this all the time. We don't do it explicitly, but we do it all the time. If you look at drunk driving, the designated driver. That's solving a social problem by getting people involved. Our government's Premier's campaign against sexual harassment, the bystander. We need to enlist the support, and we're kind of crowdsourcing more and more functions by involving people in society to work with us to solve these issues. I think a big area will be healthcare. People taking more responsibility for their healthcare. Self-care might be a little bit of a stretch, but we'll see as technology, people will be more empowered to deal more with these issues in the future. We'll never have enough public servants to deal with those issues, nurses, frontline staff. We need to figure out how do we enlist society to deal with social issues. The last one's a bit frightening in terms of 90% expect us to keep up with the private sector standard. So there's a challenge, and that means we are going to, as an organization, we have to think, how do we embrace disruptive technologies? How does that change how we're delivering services to people? We won't get it right all the time. And what does that mean to the role of the Ombudsman, understanding that as we try to transform, we might be making errors along the way, and how do we learn from that and how do we prevent it from happening in the future? So when I'm not at meetings, I'm on the internet pulling off clip art. So I'd explain to the IT folks, like, this is work. So the first row is the social media. It's really the massive exchange of information. You know, Wikipedia, these are only illustrations. The second row into fundamental commercial change. The third row is really fundamental disruption, and they're illustrative. But e-learning is, and I'm going to just talk about the bottom row. Our educational system is going to face some big, I think, positive changes going forward. That how we teach students in the future will change fundamentally. and they'll be able to learn on their own. They'll be able to access different programs. And when I do find time to work on the exercise bike, the iTunes University or you has great, you can, on any topic, you want to hear the world-leading researcher give a lecture on any particular topic, you can do that. Obviously, I need to get a life if I'm doing that. I used to listen to music, now I listen to podcasts. But e-learning is going to fundamentally change. You can be able to access the leading thinker in any topic more and more, and that's going to help more self-directed learning, I believe. Crowdfunding. You'll hear a lot of tech funds, and this is it's technology where you can buy things online and bypass the intermediaries, financial institutions and banks and all that. We're going to see that, and we've done that already in crowdfunding. The Ontario Securities Commission actually put out rules for people to raise capital through the internet. And this is only the beginning, and there's a big view that this disruptive technology is going to change. You get mortgage online, insurance online, and you bypass. It's going to be driven by algorithms. It's just like way Uber does it for hailing personal travel, and we're going to see that fundamentally change. And then how does the public service keep up with that? That's why you're going to, there's a big commitment for Ontario to really seize the digital economy, and how do we embrace that? To be more responsive to individuals and be more cost effective and even provide faster, more timely service. The last two are just more hypothetical, but very possible in the not too distant future. We had the clerks and secretaries across Canada last September, we had the first that we've organized, a policy innovation summit. And each province and territory came in with what they're most proud of in terms of innovation. And so what BC came in was their whole healthcare at home through their telephone provider, where they've created an innovation fund that invests in new technology. And you can see now that we take the most vulnerable patients to the doctor, to the clinic to get blood work. And what we see in the future is that healthcare will go to the patient. Right now it's simple tests, it's remote monitoring, heart rate, blood pressure, things of that nature, but that will expand over time. And so how do we embrace that from a disruptive technology, quality of service, while still protecting the individuals so there's equal access? So the role of the Ombudsman to ensure that we continue to ensure fair, equal, consistent access to individuals is become more important, not less. The last one's electronic voting. We won't go there, but it's going to fundamentally change how people participate in public policy and public discourse and even voting. And so it's not in the immediate future, but how far off will that be? And what does that change to the demographic voting? We know that the vast majority of senior votes and youth, vast minority of youth vote. Will that change, and will that change public policy with it? So this last slide, I want to just talk about some of the things that no one can predict the future, but there's some trend lines that we want to watch closely. And I touch upon a number of them. Why this is important for this group here is because the Ombudsman's office needs to understand these dynamic changes as well and be partners with us. And I was saying to Barbara earlier, when I get worried about if we're doing something that might have privacy issues, we invite the privacy commissioner in early to look at our initial design, so it's very upstream. We do this for the Auditor General. If we have a big complicated audit and we need to get, we run it by an internal audit, we run it by the Auditor General's office to make sure that we get it right so there's no surprises. I don't think we do that with the Ombudsman's office. And we're fundamentally changing how we're delivering our program. And we don't want the client or the citizen to get lost in the process. So I think we should look at building a stronger partnership upstream, much earlier into the system, so that the voice, and it's an asset to us to ensure that we're constantly focused on the beneficiary than the provider. And so that's something that I think that partnership will actually help us to get to where we want to go. And I think that's a fundamental partnership going forward. But crowdsourcing, co-design, those are the things that you're going to hear more and more. We consult a lot, and that's a good thing. It's not just consulting. You're moving to collaboration. Consulting is you might have an exchange of views. So we heard you, but we ignored you. And that sometimes happens. That's not an official statement, but that sometimes happens. To collaboration, where we're actually into the co-designing of the solutions. And you get much more, you get better results, stronger buy-in, and you can actually deliver things more effectively when people are involved in the delivery system, are working with you to design the system. Diverse partners. We are not, we're doing a paper, hopefully it'll be done this summer, looking at the future of the OPS. And we looked at the last 20 years, and we're going to look at the next 20 years. In the last 20 years, the number of FTEs, full-time equivalents, on the delivery side has been going down a bit. 15% of, we used to have 15% of FTEs in the Ministry of Health, providing health care. It's now 6%, representing 42% of all our program spending. So we're more from rowing to steering. And that means working with our partners, our delivery, our transfer payment recipients and partners. And that means it's going to fundamentally change how we operate. It's going to fundamentally change how we address issues. And it's going to, I think, result in better outcomes, more consistency, but also better customized to local situations. And the client will be at the center. Whether it's a client, citizen, patient, student, single mom, someone on welfare, we need to change the focus from who's delivering the program to who's receiving the program. And so that's, the last one's really the integration of services at the community level. Anyway, so those are some of the things, thoughts I wanted to share with you today. I do think the Ombudsman's office plays a particular important role. Sometimes there's a little bit of tension in the system. Something's gone wrong, and it has to be disclosed as part of the process of solving the issue. And if it's done in a systemic, balanced way, I think it improves public services. I know we have that same objective in mind. So I want to thank you for coming this morning and giving me an opportunity to speak with you. So thank you.